The massive crystal chamber hummed with the voices of 100 different species. Ambassador Zethkar adjusted his breathing apparatus and looked down at the datapad floating before his tentacles. Another year, another assessment of the galaxy's most unpredictable species. Humans, he muttered. The word creating ripples in the translation field around his head. The Galactic Council had been watching Earth for over 2 centuries now. First with fear, then with caution, and lately with something approaching relief. The species that had once worried every civilized world in the galaxy seemed to have finally settled down. The Human Integration Report shows remarkable progress, Dr. Vexilani announced from her position at the center of the chamber. The tall, blue-skinned xenopsychologist had spent most of her career studying humanity. Her 4 eyes moved independently as she scanned the gathered council members. Aggression indexes are at historic lows. Compliance with council regulations has improved by 47% over the past decade. Murmurs of approval rippled through the chamber. The Kethalari delegation clicked their approval with sharp sounds from their beak-like mouths. The floating gas bag creatures from Nexus Prime pulsed a satisfied orange color. Zethkar found himself nodding along, but something nagged at the back of his mind. Humans didn't change this quickly. In all his years of diplomatic service, he had learned that humans were creatures of stubborn consistency. Yet here they were, apparently transformed into model galactic citizens almost overnight. The trade restriction compliance has been particularly impressive, continued Dr. Vexilani. When we limited their access to quantum crystals 3 years ago, they accepted the decision without protest. When we established mining quotas in the Outer Rim systems, they actually requested lower limits than we had planned to impose. Requested lower limits? The question came from Counselor Drex, a massive rock-like being whose species had fought 3 wars with humanity in the past century. That doesn't sound like any human I've ever dealt with. Dr. Vexilani's upper 2 eyes focused on Drex while her lower pair continued scanning her notes. Species can evolve culturally as well as biologically, Counselor. The humans appear to have learned the value of cooperation over conflict. Zethkar pulled up his own files on human behavior. The data supported Dr. Vexilani's assessment, but the patterns felt wrong somehow. Humans had been the galaxy's most aggressively expansionist species for generations. They had colonized worlds other species deemed impossible to settle. They had developed technologies that broke several supposedly universal rules of physics. They had fought wars against impossible odds and somehow won most of them. What about their military development? Asked Counselor Yithra, her snake-like body coiling nervously. The last reports showed significant weapons research. Dramatically reduced, Dr. Vexilani replied smoothly. Their defense spending has dropped by 60%. They've decommissioned half their battle fleet and converted the ships to civilian cargo haulers. Most impressive of all, they've voluntarily shared their defensive technologies with neighboring systems. The chamber filled with approving sounds. Several council members expressed surprise and pleasure at this development. The Veltari delegation began their ceremonial harmony, a series of musical tones that indicated deep satisfaction. Zethkar wasn't singing along. He remembered the human fleet from the Andraxis conflict 15 years ago. Ships that moved like living things, weapons that seemed to think for themselves, tactics that made no sense until they had already won the battle. Those weren't the kind of capabilities a species simply abandoned. Have we conducted recent inspections of human space? He asked, his voice cutting through the harmonious sounds. Several, Dr. Vexilani confirmed, all routine, all welcomed by human authorities. They've been remarkably transparent about their operations. Transparent. Zethkar repeated the word, tasting its meaning through his translation implant. Since when did humans do anything transparently? Their entire culture seemed built around layers of hidden meaning, backup plans for backup plans, and strategies within strategies. I propose we conduct a comprehensive inspection tour, he announced, his tentacles spreading wide in the formal gesture for serious business. If humanity has truly transformed as dramatically as these reports suggest, they won't object to a detailed examination of their current capabilities. Counselor Drex rumbled agreement. The rock speaker supports this proposal. Trust must be verified. Dr. Vexilani looked slightly annoyed at the suggestion that her assessment might be incomplete, but she nodded professionally. Of course. I'll arrange for a full inspection team. We can visit their primary colonies. examine their industrial facilities, and conduct detailed interviews with their leadership. Excellent, Zethkar said, though the nagging feeling in his mind only grew stronger. I volunteer to lead the inspection personally. The vote passed overwhelmingly. Within days, an inspection fleet had been organized. Zethkar found himself aboard the Council survey ship Harmony of Worlds, accompanied by experts from a dozen different species. Their mission was simple: verify that humanity's transformation was genuine. The response from Earth came within hours of their formal request. Not only would they welcome the inspection, but they had already prepared detailed itineraries for the team. They offered access to any facility, any database, any individual the Council wished to examine. They even suggested locations that hadn't been on the original inspection list, see? Dr. Vexilani said as they reviewed the human response. Complete cooperation. This is exactly the kind of mature, civilized behavior we hope to encourage. Zethkar read through the message again. The language was perfectly diplomatic, offering everything the Council could want and more. It was almost as if the humans had anticipated this inspection and prepared for it in advance. That thought should have been comforting. Instead, it made his breathing apparatus work a little faster. The first stop was Luna, humanity's ancient moon colony. The human representatives met them at the docking bay with broad smiles and detailed presentations. They toured manufacturing facilities, reviewed production records, and examined defensive installations. Everything was exactly as reported to the Council, perhaps even a little less impressive than the official numbers suggested. Their population figures might be slightly inflated, noted Inspector Coltes, a methodical being who specialized in demographic analysis. The residential areas seemed designed for about 15% fewer inhabitants than their census reports indicate. Bureaucratic inefficiency, suggested their human guide, a middle-aged woman named Director Sarah Chen. We're still learning how to manage colonies this large efficiently. The explanation made sense. It even fit with the general pattern of human improvement over the past decade. They were learning, growing, becoming more civilized. So why did Zethkar feel like they were being shown exactly what someone wanted them to see? The tour continued to Mars, then to the asteroid mining stations, then to the newer colonies in the Centauri system. Everywhere they went, the humans were helpful, honest, and refreshingly transparent about their limitations. They admitted to production shortfalls, acknowledged problems with their colonial administration, and freely discussed their technological challenges. It was perfect. Too perfect. As their ship moved toward the final inspection site, Zethkar stared out at the stars and wondered if he was being paranoid. The evidence was overwhelming. Humanity had changed. They had learned to be good galactic citizens. But deep in his mind, an old memory stirred. A human general captured during the Vegan War, smiling as he surrendered. Sometimes, the human had said, the best way to win is to let your enemy think they've already won. The inspection ship moved on through space, carrying its cargo of increasingly satisfied council members toward their next destination. Behind them, human space continued its daily routines, peaceful and productive and completely open to galactic oversight. At least, that's what it looked like from the outside. 3 weeks into the inspection tour, Inspector Coltes was beginning to feel like her species' reputation for thoroughness was being put to the test. The humans had been almost aggressively helpful, providing more data than requested and offering access to areas not on the original inspection list. The power consumption numbers don't add up, she muttered to herself, reviewing the data for the 5th time. Her insectoid assistant, Zriktar, clicked his mandibles in agreement. Explain the discrepancy, Zriktar buzzed through his translator. Coltes pointed to her display with one of her 4 arms. Look at the industrial output reports from the Titan facility. They claim to be producing 60,000 tons of refined metals per month. But their power consumption suggests capacity for at least twice that amount. Perhaps inefficient systems? Zriktar suggested. Humans are known for wasteful engineering. The explanation should have satisfied her. But Coltes had spent her career analyzing colonial development patterns. Humans might be wasteful in many areas, but never with power systems. Their energy efficiency had always been one of their most impressive technological achievements. Meanwhile, Ambassador Zethkar was having his own doubts on Europa Station. The facility manager, a cheerful man named Director Williams, was walking them through the ice mining operations with obvious pride. Production is down 12% from last year, Williams explained, gesturing toward the massive boring equipment. We're still working out some technical difficulties with the new extraction methods. Technical difficulties? Dr. Vexilani asked, making notes on her datapad. Nothing serious, Williams assured her. Just growing pains as we scale up operations. We expect to have everything running smoothly within the next year. Zethkar watched the massive machines working below them. They moved with precision and efficiency that suggested no technical problems at all. In fact, they appeared to be running at optimal capacity, yet the production numbers Williams had shown them indicated significant underperformance. Could we examine your equipment maintenance records? Zethkar asked casually. Of course, Williams replied with enthusiasm. I'll have everything prepared for you this afternoon. That afternoon, the maintenance records showed exactly what Williams had described. Frequent breakdowns, efficiency problems, and ongoing technical challenges. The documentation was thorough, detailed, and completely convincing. It was also dated incorrectly. Zethkar's species had an unusual sensitivity to temporal distortions, and something about the electronic signatures on these files felt wrong. Not falsified exactly, but created in a different time sequence than their timestamps suggested. Across the station, Counselor Yithra was conducting her own investigation into human military capabilities. The humans had been remarkably open about their defensive systems, even allowing her to examine their supposedly decommissioned warships in the orbital scrapyard. As you can see, explained Captain Rodriguez, they're human escort. We've removed all weapons systems and converted the power cores to industrial use. Most of these ships are being recycled for raw materials. Yithra slithered through the stripped hull of what had once been a formidable battle cruiser. The weapons mounts were indeed empty. The armor had been removed in sections and the command systems had been completely gutted. It looked exactly like a ship being prepared for scrapping, but her species' natural electromagnetic sensitivity picked up something odd. Deep in the ship's core, she detected power signatures that didn't match the industrial systems supposedly installed there. The patterns were subtle, almost hidden, but they suggested far more sophisticated electronics than should exist in a decommissioned vessel. What's the purpose of that power core configuration? She asked, pointing toward the ship's center. Captain Rodriguez checked his datapad. Standard industrial fusion plant. We use it to power the recycling equipment. May I examine it more closely? I'm afraid that section is sealed off for safety reasons, Rodriguez replied apologetically. Radiation hazard from the recycling process. But I can show you the technical specifications if that would help. The specifications he provided were perfectly reasonable and completely boring. They described exactly the kind of industrial power system he had claimed. But Yithra's electromagnetic senses told a different story entirely. The real breakthrough came when Inspector Kolthes made an accidental discovery on Mars. She had been reviewing population distribution patterns when she took a wrong turn in the colony's residential section and found herself in an area not marked on any of their maps. The corridor was clearly inhabited, with the subtle signs of human occupation that she had learned to recognize. Personal items, wear patterns on the floors, the particular way humans arranged their living spaces. But according to every official document she had been given, this section of the colony was unused. Excuse me, she said to her human guide, a young man named David Park. This area wasn't on our tour schedule. David looked genuinely surprised, checking his own data pad with obvious confusion. You're right, I'm sorry. This is just overflow storage. Nothing interesting here. Let me get you back to the main route. As they walked away, Kolthes discreetly activated her personal scanner. The readings showed clear signs of recent habitation, atmospheric processing systems in active use, and power consumption patterns consistent with a fully occupied residential area. But more importantly, her scanner detected something else. Children's voices, faint but unmistakable, coming from behind the closed doors they had passed. That evening, the inspection team gathered for their daily report session. The general consensus remained positive. The humans were cooperating fully. Their claims about reduced capabilities appeared accurate, and their transformation into peaceful galactic citizens seemed genuine. I do have some minor concerns about data accuracy, Kolthes reported carefully. Some population figures and production numbers seem inconsistent. Bureaucratic confusion, Dr. Vexilani dismissed. Large colonial operations are complex to manage. Small discrepancies are to be expected. What about the military assessment? Zethkar asked Counselor Yithra, the snake-like being coiled thoughtfully before responding. Their ships appear to be decommissioned as reported. However, I detected some unusual power signatures that might warrant further investigation. Probably residual systems, suggested Dr. Vexilani. Old military hardware is notorious for generating electromagnetic ghosts long after deactivation. Zethkar nodded, but his unease continued to grow. Every explanation the humans offered was reasonable. Every inconsistency had a logical cause. Every anomaly could be attributed to the normal chaos of managing a vast interstellar civilization. But the pattern bothered him. In his experience, real chaos was messier, less consistent. The problems they were finding seemed almost deliberately designed to explain away exactly the kinds of concerns the inspection team was raising. I think we should extend our inspection timeline, he announced. Add some unscheduled stops to our itinerary. The humans have been very accommodating, Dr. Vexilani pointed out. I'm sure they wouldn't object to additional inspections, but is it really necessary? All our findings confirm their reported status. Humor an old diplomat's paranoia, Zethkar replied. If they're as cooperative as they appear, they won't mind a few extra visits. The response from human authorities came within hours. They would be delighted to accommodate any additional inspections the Council desired. They even suggested several new locations that might be of interest, including some recently established research stations in previously unexplored systems. That night, as Zethkar stared out at the stars from his cabin aboard the inspection ship, he found himself thinking about human nature. They were a species that had survived ice ages, world wars, and contact with hostile alien civilizations through one consistent trait: adaptability. But what if their current behavior wasn't adaptation? What if it was camouflage? The inspection ship changed course toward their first unscheduled destination, a human research station in the Kepler system that wasn't supposed to exist according to the official reports. The humans had suggested it themselves when offered the chance to include additional sites, which meant either they were being completely honest about their activities, or they were confident that whatever they were hiding there wouldn't be found by a Council inspection team. Zethkar hoped it was the former, but his instinct suggested it was probably the latter. Dr. Vexilani had always prided herself on understanding patterns. Her species had evolved from pack hunters who tracked prey across continent-spanning forests, and pattern recognition was built into her genetic code. But the patterns she was seeing in human behavior made no sense at all. She floated alone in her research pod aboard the inspection ship, surrounded by holographic displays showing 10 years of human decision-making data. Each choice, viewed individually, seemed perfectly reasonable. Humans accepting trade restrictions to maintain galactic peace. Humans withdrawing from contested territories to avoid conflict. Humans sharing technology to build trust with neighboring species. But when she layered all the decisions together, something else emerged. Something that made her four stomachs twist with unease. Computer, display human territorial concessions over the past decade, she commanded. The hologram shifted to show a three-dimensional map of local space. Red zones marked areas where humans had withdrawn or accepted limitations on their activities. The pattern looked like a species learning to respect boundaries, accepting their place in the galactic community. Now overlay resource discovery data for the same period. New information flowed across the display. Blue markers indicated valuable resources found during the past 10 years. Green lines showed new trade routes established. Yellow zones marked systems where humans had been granted research or exploration rights. Vexilani stared at the combined image for a long time. Then she began to see it. Every red zone where humans had withdrawn or accepted restrictions had later been revealed to contain fewer resources than initially estimated. Every green trade route they had negotiated gave them access to systems that turned out to be incredibly valuable. Every yellow research zone they had requested had yielded discoveries that weren't supposed to exist. Computer, calculate probability that this resource pattern occurred by chance. The machine hummed for several moments before responding. Probability approaches 0. Statistical confidence exceeds 99.7% that this pattern represents deliberate planning based on superior information. Vexilani's breathing apparatus worked faster. Superior information meant they had known about these resources before the negotiations, which meant either humans had developed impossibly advanced survey technology, or they had been conducting secret exploration far beyond what they had reported to the Council. She called up the files from their recent inspection stops. Luna, Mars, Europa, Titan, Centauri Prime. All the places they had been welcomed with open arms and shown exactly what they wanted to see. Computer. Analyze production capacity versus resource availability at inspected human facilities. More data flowed across her displays. Power consumption records, population data, industrial output reports, resource allocation summaries. Everything the humans had shared so freely. The picture that emerged should have been reassuring. Humans operating at or below their reported capacity, consuming resources at sustainable rates, maintaining populations within established limits. But Vexilani's pattern recognition instincts were screaming warnings at her. She had spent decades studying human psychology, and one thing she knew for certain was that humans didn't think sustainably. They thought exponentially. They were a species that had gone from wooden sailing ships to interstellar travel in less than 300 years. They didn't accept limits. They found ways around them. Computer. Model human expansion patterns if they were operating at maximum efficiency instead of reported levels. The hologram transformed again. Instead of the modest, sustainable growth shown in official reports, it displayed a web of colonies, mining operations, and research stations that would make humanity the dominant force in local space. But that was impossible. The inspection team had visited dozens of human facilities. They had examined records, interviewed personnel, observed operations firsthand. Everything confirmed the official reports, unless the humans had been showing them exactly what they expected to see. Vexilani's research pod felt suddenly very small. She activated the communication system and requested immediate meetings with Ambassador Zethkar and the other team leaders. An hour later, they gathered in the ship's main conference chamber. Zethkar's tentacles moved restlessly as he listened to her presentation. Inspector Kolthes clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. Counselor Yithra coiled and uncoiled in obvious agitation. "You're suggesting a conspiracy spanning decades and involving millions of human personnel," Dr. Vexilani concluded. "They would have had to coordinate their responses across dozens of worlds, falsify countless records, and maintain perfect operational security for years." "Yes," Vexilani replied simply. "That's exactly what I'm suggesting." "But we've seen their facilities ourselves," protested Kolthes. "We've examined their equipment, interviewed their workers, reviewed their production records. Everything supports their claims. What if they built their facilities to look exactly like what we expected to find?" Vexilani asked. "What if the workers we interviewed were trained to give specific responses? What if the records we reviewed were created specifically for our inspection?" The chamber fell silent. The implications of what she was suggesting were staggering. It would mean that humanity had been playing an incredibly complex game of deception, one that required resources, planning, and coordination on a scale that would be impressive even by galactic standards. "There's another possibility," Zethkar said slowly. "What if they've been telling us the truth about what we were allowed to see, but there are things we weren't shown?" Yithra uncoiled with sudden understanding. "Hidden facilities, secret operations, parallel infrastructure that we never knew existed. The population discrepancies," Kolthes added. "The power consumption anomalies. The unusual electromagnetic signatures. What if those weren't errors in their reporting but hints of something much larger?" Vexilani pulled up another holographic display. "Computer. Model human space assuming the existence of undisclosed facilities operating at the capacity suggested by anomalous data points." The new image was breathtaking and terrifying. It showed humanity operating colonies in systems they weren't supposed to have reached, maintaining industrial capacity far beyond their reported levels, and supporting populations that would make them one of the largest civilizations in the galaxy. "This is speculation," Dr. Vexilani said, but her voice lacked conviction. "We have no proof that such facilities exist." "Then let's find proof," Zethkar declared. "Computer, analyze our planned itinerary for remaining inspection sites. Compare with this theoretical model. Where should we look if we want to find evidence of undisclosed human activities?" The computer highlighted several systems on the edge of human space. Remote, supposedly uninhabitable, regions that humans had claimed for scientific, Research. Areas where they should find small teams of scientists. Studying hostile environments. Change. Course for the Barnard system, Zethkar ordered. And this time we don't give the humans advance notice of our arrival. The ship's captain, a professional council naval officer, looked uncomfortable. Sir, diplomatic protocol requires advance notification of inspection visits. Not for routine survey missions in unclaimed space, Zethkar replied. The Barnard system is listed as uninhabited in council records. We're simply conducting a routine survey to verify that status. As the ship altered course, Vexilani continued studying her data patterns. The more she analyzed human behavior over the past decade, the more convinced she became that they had been watching a performance. Every concession, every compromise, every gesture of cooperation had been calculated to produce a specific result. But what was the end game? If humans were as powerful as her models suggested, why maintain the pretense of being junior partners in the galactic community? Why not simply announce their capabilities and demand recognition as a major power? The answer, when it came to her, was so simple that she almost dismissed it. But the more she thought about it, the more sense it made. What if they already were the major power? What if they had been allowing the council to believe it was managing them, while they were actually managing the council? The inspection ship moved through hyperspace toward the Barnard system, carrying its cargo of increasingly worried council members toward what they hoped would be answers. Behind them, in systems they thought they understood, human space continued its daily routines with the same peaceful efficiency they had observed for years. But now they were beginning to wonder if that peace was the most frightening thing of all. The Barnard system was supposed to be empty. According to every council survey, every database, every official record, it contained nothing but a dim red star and a handful of lifeless rocks, too cold and radiation-soaked for even the hardiest species to consider inhabitable, which was why Ambassador Zethkar's breathing apparatus nearly failed when their ship dropped out of hyperspace and detected 17 different energy signatures. Sensor error? Asked Inspector Kolthus, her mandibles clicking rapidly with stress. Negative, replied the ship's captain, his professional calm cracking slightly. Multiple artificial energy sources, industrial-scale power generation, extensive orbital infrastructure. He paused, staring at his displays. Population readings suggest approximately 12 million inhabitants. Dr. Vexilani felt her four stomachs drop toward her feet. 12 million people in a system that didn't officially exist. Her theoretical models had suggested hidden human facilities, but this was beyond anything she had imagined. Hail them, Zethkar ordered. Standard Council inspection protocols. The response came within minutes, but it wasn't from the facilities they could see on their sensors. Instead, a sleek ship materialized near them with technology that shouldn't have been possible. It had simply appeared, without the energy signatures or spatial distortions that should have accompanied any known form of faster-than-light travel. Council inspection vessel, came a calm human voice over the communication system. This is Captain Sarah Martinez of the Barnard Station Authority. Welcome to our system. We understand you're conducting a routine survey and we're happy to assist. Zethkar stared at the ship that had appeared from nowhere. Captain Martinez, our records indicate this system is uninhabited. Could you explain the presence of extensive orbital infrastructure and a population in the millions? Of course, Ambassador, Martinez replied with the same cheerful cooperation they had encountered throughout their inspection tour. The Barnard Colony project has been operating for 8 years now. I'm surprised it's not in your records. We submitted all the proper documentation to the Council Colonial Administration Office. Kolthus was frantically searching through Council databases. There's no record of any colonial application for the Barnard system, she reported. No environmental impact studies, no population surveys, no resource development permits, nothing. Bureaucratic mix-up, I'm sure, Martinez said smoothly. You know how complicated the Council permitting process can be. We probably filed the wrong forms with the wrong office, but we're operating a completely legitimate research and development facility here. Would you like a tour? The tour that followed broke every assumption the Council had held about human capabilities. The orbital stations were marvels of engineering that should have taken decades to construct. The population lived in cities carved into asteroids with environmental systems more advanced than anything in Council space. The industrial facilities were producing materials and technologies that supposedly didn't exist. "This is our quantum manufacturing facility," explained their guide, a woman named Director Kim, who seemed genuinely excited to show off their achievements. "We can produce about 12,000 tons of processed quantum steel per day." Yithra coiled nervously. "The entire galactic production of quantum steel is only 8,000 tons per day. How is it possible that one human facility outproduces the entire Council industrial base?" "Oh, we're not the only facility," Director Kim replied casually. "There are 17 other quantum steel plants operating in similar research stations throughout human space. This one is actually on the smaller side." The silence that followed was deafening. Counselor Yithra did rapid calculations in her head. 18 facilities producing quantum steel at the rates they were claiming would make humanity the dominant industrial power in the galaxy by a factor of 10. "What research are you conducting here?" Dr. Vexilani asked, her voice barely steady. "Terraforming mostly," Director Kim replied. "We're working on techniques to make uninhabitable systems like this one suitable for large-scale colonization. The Barnard system is actually perfect for our experiments because it presents so many environmental challenges. They were shown atmospheric processors that could transform poisonous air into breathable atmosphere in months instead of centuries, gravity generators that could make tiny asteroids feel like Earth-normal worlds, fusion plants so efficient they could power cities with fuel gathered from empty space. But it was the population data that truly staggered the inspection team. The humans living in the Barnard system weren't researchers or industrial workers. They were families, communities, entire societies that had been quietly establishing themselves in supposedly impossible environments. "How long have your people been living here?" Zethkar asked. "The first permanent settlers arrived about 6 years ago," Director Kim replied. "We started with 50,000 volunteers for the initial terraforming project. The population has grown naturally since then. Grown to 12 million in 6 years. Kolthes's voice was barely a whisper. "Birth rates are quite high when you have unlimited resources and plenty of space," Director Kim said with a smile. "Plus, we've had some immigration from other colonies as word spread about our success here." Other colonies. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. How many other secret colonies existed in systems the Council thought were empty? "Director Kim," Zethkar said carefully, "how many of these research stations exist in total?" "Oh, I couldn't give you an exact number," she replied. "New projects are starting up all the time, but I'd estimate somewhere around 200 active sites at the moment, maybe 300 if you count the smaller experimental facilities." The inspection team exchanged glances of pure horror. 300 hidden colonies, each one potentially housing millions of people. Industrial capacity that dwarfed the entire Council infrastructure. Technologies that made everything they thought they knew about physics look primitive. Why didn't humanity report these developments to the Council? Dr. Vexilani asked, struggling to maintain her professional composure. Director Kim looked genuinely puzzled by the question. "We did report them. Every facility files regular status updates with the appropriate Council offices. Environmental impact assessments, population reports, industrial output summaries, everything required by galactic law. There are no such reports in Council records," Kolthes stated firmly. "Then someone in the Council bureaucracy isn't doing their job very well," Director Kim replied with a slight smile. "But that's not really our problem, is it? We're just researchers trying to improve life for our people while contributing to galactic scientific knowledge." As their tour continued, the full scope of human achievement became impossible to deny. This wasn't just one secret colony. This was evidence of a parallel civilization that had been growing quietly in the shadows while the Council thought it was managing humanity's gradual integration into galactic society. The ship that had brought them here was equally revealing. Captain Martinez proudly explained the instantaneous travel technology that had allowed them to appear without warning. It was based on principles that human scientists had developed by studying dimensional physics in systems too dangerous for other species to explore. "We've been sharing our research with the Council." "Of course," Martinez explained, "but the review process is quite slow. We understand the reports are still being evaluated by various committees." "What reports?" Zethkar demanded. "The dimensional physics research summaries we've been filing quarterly for the past 5 years," Martinez replied, "along with the gravity manipulation studies, the quantum engineering developments, and the consciousness interface technology documentation. None of those reports had ever reached the Council floor." Either the human bureaucrats were lying, or the Council's administrative system had somehow failed to process the most important scientific developments in galactic history. As they prepared to leave the Barnard system, the inspection team sat in stunned silence aboard their ship. They had uncovered proof that humanity was operating at a scale and sophistication level that made them potentially the most powerful civilization in the galaxy. But more disturbing than the discovery itself was the manner of its revelation. The humans had welcomed them with open arms, answered every question, provided detailed information about their capabilities, and maintained the same cheerful cooperation that had characterized their entire inspection tour. They weren't hiding their achievements. They were simply continuing to be nice while casually demonstrating that they had been operating several centuries ahead of everyone else. "Set course for Earth," Zethkar ordered quietly. "We need to have a conversation with human leadership about their definition of transparency." The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in its 1,000-year history. Representatives from every major species sat in the crystal chamber, but instead of the usual diplomatic noise and ceremonial posturing, there was only silence. The kind of silence that comes when everyone in the room realizes they have fundamentally misunderstood reality. Ambassador Zethkar stood at the center of the chamber, his tentacles moving slowly as he delivered the inspection team's report. The holographic displays surrounding him showed the true scope of human civilization. Hundreds of colonies, industrial capacity that dwarfed the rest of the galaxy combined, and technologies that redefined what was possible. To summarize, Zethkar concluded, humanity has been operating as the galaxy's dominant civilization for at least a decade. They have simply chosen not to inform us of this fact. Counselor Drex, the massive rock being whose species had fought wars with humanity in the past, spoke first. "They deceived us, did they?" Dr. Vexilani asked quietly. Her comprehensive analysis of the data had led her to an uncomfortable conclusion. "We asked them to report their activities. They filed reports. We asked them to accept limitations on their expansion. They accepted limitations on their public expansion, while privately expanding into systems we didn't know they could colonize. We asked them to reduce their military capabilities. They reduced their visible military capabilities while developing technologies that make traditional military concepts obsolete. They followed the letter of every agreement while completely ignoring the spirit," Counselor Yithra hissed, or suggested, a new voice from the chamber's entrance. "We followed our own assumptions while ignoring what they were actually telling us." Every head, tentacle, and sensory organ in the chamber turned toward the speaker. Ambassador Chen Wei-Ming of Earth walked into the crystal chamber with the same calm confidence he had shown for years of council meetings. But now his presence felt different. Where once he had seemed like a junior partner hoping for acceptance, he now appeared to be exactly what he was, the representative of a civilization that could probably conquer the entire galaxy if it chose to do so. "Ambassador Chen," Zethkar said carefully, "we were not expecting human representation at this emergency session. We monitor council communications as part of our standard diplomatic protocols," Chen replied politely. "When we detected preparations for an emergency session concerning humanity, we thought it would be appropriate to attend. We hope that's acceptable." The casual admission that humans monitored council communications sent a ripple of unease through the chamber. How long had they been listening to supposedly private discussions? "We have discovered that humanity has been concealing the true scope of its activities from this council," Counselor Drex rumbled accusingly. Chen looked genuinely puzzled. "In what way, Counselor? The Barnard system colonies? The hidden industrial facilities? The undisclosed technological developments?" "None of those were hidden," Chen replied. "The Barnard Colony Project has been submitting regular reports to the Council Colonial Administration Office for 8 years. Our industrial facilities are documented in our quarterly economic filings. Our technological research is available in the Council Science Database. There are no such reports in Council records." Coltes clicked angrily. Chen activated a small device, and holographic documents appeared throughout the chamber. Hundreds of them, thousands, all bearing official council filing stamps and registration numbers. Report CC4471B, Barnard System Environmental Assessment, filed with the Colonial Administration Office 3 months ago. Chen read from one document. Report ID 8823X, Quantum Manufacturing Capacity Update, filed with the Industrial Development Committee last quarter. Report ST9934M, Dimensional Physics Research Summary, filed with the Science and Technology Review Board 2 weeks ago. The silence that followed was deafening. Every document Chen was displaying had been properly filed with the appropriate council office. The problem wasn't that humans had failed to report their activities. The problem was that the council's administrative system was so complex and bureaucratic that important information never reached the people who needed to see it. Dr. Vexilani accessed the council database from her personal terminal. The reports were there exactly as Chen claimed, filed in the proper offices, assigned to the correct committees, processed according to standard procedures. They had simply been buried in the massive bureaucracy that governed galactic civilization. "Why didn't you bring these developments to our attention directly?" Zethkar asked. "We did," Chen replied. "Multiple times. I personally briefed this council on our dimensional research 18 months ago. Ambassador Yithra attended my presentation on quantum manufacturing capabilities. The minutes are in your own records," Yithra coiled in embarrassment. She did remember a presentation by Chen about human research projects, but it had been scheduled during a busy session, positioned between reports on trade disputes and agricultural quotas, and Chen's modest presentation style had made it seem like routine scientific cooperation rather than a revolutionary breakthrough. "You deliberately understated the significance of your achievements," she accused. "We reported our achievements accurately," Chen corrected gently. "We simply didn't insist that you pay attention to them." The distinction was important, and everyone in the chamber understood it. Humans had been telling the truth. They had been filing proper reports, making formal presentations, and following every diplomatic protocol. They had simply done so in a way that allowed the council to ignore the implications of what they were hearing. "But why?" Councillor Drex demanded. "If you possess such overwhelming capabilities, why maintain the pretense of being a junior member of this council?" For the first time since entering the chamber, Chen's professional demeanor shifted slightly. The smile that appeared on his face wasn't threatening, but it carried weight that made several council members unconsciously step backward. "Because we like the current arrangement," he replied simply. "You like being restricted by council regulations?" Kolthus asked incredulously. "We like having a stable, peaceful galactic community where trade flows freely. Conflicts are resolved diplomatically, and scientific knowledge is shared openly," Chen explained. "The council system works quite well for maintaining that kind of environment. But you could simply take control," Yithra pointed out. "With your capabilities, you could dominate the entire galaxy." "We could," Chen agreed. "But why would we want to? Domination requires constant enforcement, continuous military action, and enormous expenditure of resources to maintain control over unwilling populations. The current system gives us everything we need while allowing us to focus our energy on research, exploration, and improving life for our citizens." Dr. Vexilani was beginning to understand the pattern she had been seeing in human behavior. "You've been managing us." "We've been participating in a system that benefits everyone," Chen corrected diplomatically, "by making us think we were managing you. By allowing you to believe whatever made you most comfortable with our presence in the galactic community." The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't been deceiving the council so much as they had been carefully maintaining the council's illusions about who was actually in charge. Every trade agreement, every territorial limitation, every diplomatic compromise had been designed to preserve the existing system while giving humans the freedom to develop according to their own priorities. "What happens now?" Zethkar asked quietly. "Now that we know the truth about your capabilities?" "Now we continue exactly as before," Chen replied. "Unless you would prefer a different arrangement." The threat wasn't stated, but it didn't need to be. Everyone in the chamber understood that humanity was offering to continue the comfortable fiction of council authority over galactic affairs. The alternative was acknowledging that humans had already become the de facto rulers of local space and could formalize that status whenever they chose. "The trade agreements remain in effect?" asked the Kethalari representative. "Of course. They benefit everyone involved. The territorial boundaries? We have no interest in changing them. We have plenty of room for expansion in systems other species can't use. The technology sharing protocols? We'll continue sharing appropriate technologies through proper council channels, subject to the usual review processes. The relief in the chamber was palpable. The system they had built over centuries could continue functioning. The only difference was that now they knew who was really making it work. But Chen wasn't finished. "We do have one small request." The entire chamber tensed. "We'd appreciate more efficient processing of our administrative filings," he said with a gentle smile. "It would make it easier for us to keep you properly informed of our activities." The laughter that erupted from several council members was part relief and part hysteria. Humanity's great demand for acknowledgement of their galactic supremacy was better paperwork processing. As the session concluded and representatives began filing out of the chamber, Dr. Vexilani found herself walking alongside Ambassador Chen. "How long have you been planning this?" she asked. "Planning what?" Chen replied. "This entire arrangement, managing the council while appearing to be managed by it."